Alright guys, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be giving you an overview of the Protection Paladin in TBC Classic to help you make a better decision on whether you want to actually play one or not. First of all, I'll give you a little bit of an introduction of the class, mainly talking about what it's like to actually play one in a raid and their pros and cons. Then we'll go through all the new spells. And lastly, I want to go a little bit deeper in explaining the playstyle of a Protection Paladin, and then you can decide whether you're going to find it fun or not. So Protection Paladins get a bit of a reputation for being the tank that just gets the trash mobs. Okay, they're great at doing AoE threat and everything like that, and they're really just used as a tank that gets the adds. This is a little bit of an incorrect perception, to be honest. Protection Paladins are more than powerful and capable of fulfilling the role of a main tank, particularly as TBC Classic raids are going to be much easier than they were on private servers. The simple fact is that some bosses are better tanked by a warrior, and then some bosses are better tanked by a paladin. I will admit that most bosses are better tanked by a warrior, but it's not going to be totally impossible for a Protection Paladin to tank these fights, and having a Protection Paladin as a main tank definitely is not going to be the end of the world. I'll give you a little example. So on Gruul, obviously he does an AoE silence, which makes it awkward for a Protection Paladin to keep up his Holy Shield because that counts as a spell. It's not impossible for a Protection Paladin to keep it up, but it's just a little bit easier to have a warrior tank Gruul, particularly with his cooldowns and by the fact that Gruul gets more and more powerful the longer the fight goes on. But saying that, the first time I actually downed Gruul on the Endless Well, which is an extremely highly buffed private server, we did actually have Protection Paladin as a main tank. Anyway, moving on, there's bosses like Morrogrim Tidewalker that attacks so fast that a warrior won't be able to keep a shield block up, and he's at higher risk of getting a crushing blow, but a paladin will be able to keep up his holy shield because they have more stacks of holy shield as compared to shield block, and he has a lower chance of getting crushed. By the way guys, if you like the video so far and want to see more videos like this covering all the classes and specs in TBC, then be sure to subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitch for, again, more stuff like this. So overall, I don't think calling a Protection Paladin the off tank for adds and trash is a real fair assessment, but obviously when it does come to tanking adds and trash, the Prot Paladin is actually amazing. Firstly, because of Holy Shield having more stacks than shield block from the Protection Warrior, this means he's better at tanking numerous melee hits from multiple enemies before he's banging trouble. He can essentially maintain that full-on avoidance longer than a Protection Warrior, and obviously the AoE threat generated from Consecration Holy Shield is very, very nice indeed. This obviously allows Warlocks and Mages and any other AoE DPS to pump harder and kill those adds faster, which obviously also makes a Protection Paladin the superior dungeon rep farming tank, because you can get those dungeons cleared much faster than tanking with a Feral Druid or Protection Warrior, which means you get your rep faster, which means just less time farming rep. Protection Paladins also have the ability to totally destroy classic WoW dungeons with their AoE farming capabilities to make a lot of gold per hour. A fresh level 70 Protection Paladin with some decent blue gear and maybe a few Karazhan epics can easily farm over 200 gold per hour just vendoring trash loot dropped from classic WoW dungeons. And what's great about this gold farming method, it's a very reliable gold making method because it's instanced. You don't have any competition with anyone else, obviously because you're in your own dungeon, so you don't have to compete with other people in the open world for natural resources like elementals and gas clouds and everything like that. So there you go, there's my introduction for the Protection Paladin. Now let's start talking about the new brand spanking spells that Protection Paladins get in TBC. So first of all, we have Righteous Defense. It's a bit of a weird one because it only affects friendly targets, but don't worry, I've got your back with a macro that essentially affects target of target. So it just essentially turns it into a normal taunt, and the whole only affects a friendly target element of the spell is totally made redundant. Okay, absolutely took me ages to get this macro working in classic WoW, but it does in fact work. And it does actually affect 3 targets, so it's basically a cleave taunt on a very short cooldown. Next we have Avenger's Shield. It basically hurls a shield at the target that deals holy damage, but then also jumps to 2 more targets and also dazes them for 6 seconds on a 30-second cooldown. This becomes your #1 pulling tool when it comes to clearing dungeon trash or getting some really good early threat generated on a dungeon boss or even a raid boss. Some paladins will actually later drop Avenger's Shield for picking up some other different talents. We'll talk more about that later. It's only really viable if you start to get better and better spell power gear, where using Avenger's Shield isn't absolutely essential for generating aggro when you pull a boss. But then again, a lot of paladins just love to keep it because it's such a fun and satisfying spell to use, and it's always going to be great at clearing dungeons. You also get a new passive ability called Spiritual Attunement, which is an absolute godsend for Protection Paladin because it largely fixes their mana issues by a country mile. It basically causes all healing on you to get converted into mana generation, so normally you actually have totally infinite mana in a 25-man raiding environment, maybe even a 10 raiding environment to be honest, because you're receiving so much healing, which obviously in turn means more survivability but also more aggro generated, because you're obviously going to use your mana on aggro generating abilities. So let's talk more in depth about the playstyle. You know, what is your life like and what are you actually doing on a day-to-day basis as a Protection Paladin? Obviously for a tank there's 2 major aspects of the playstyle. 1, staying alive. 2, generating a truckload of aggro so that the other DPS in the raid can do more damage. To stay alive, your only real tool is Holy Shield, okay? You want to maintain it 100% of the time, because what you try to achieve as a Holy Paladin is 102.4 Avoidance with your Holy Shield active to make yourself immune to crushing blows. Now if you want to know what your Avoidance rating is, you can use this macro, I will put it in the description too, and obviously only use it when you have Holy Shield active. So basically, when you have Holy Shield active, you are totally immune to crushing blows, and obviously it massively reduces the damage you take, and also generates a lot of aggro, but we'll talk more about that later. Overall, Protection Paladin without Holy Shield active is bang in trouble. Apart from this, you also have Lay of the Hands, which is really your only real defensive cooldown that returns you to full health. It's kind of nice when you're in a tight spot, but it also drains all your mana. So you only really want to use this in a raiding environment where you're basically getting infinite mana from the healing that you're receiving, or with a cheeky mana potion. Now let's talk about threat generation, because obviously this is very important. First of all, you have like checks for your pre-pull. Obviously you want Righteous Fury up to increase the amount of threat you generate from your holy spells, and then you normally pop Holy Shield, your Seal and Consecration, and then you pull with Avenger's Shield into the Consecration. And you know, the first hit you're essentially going to take is going to be a Holy Shield countered hit, which is going to generate a lot of aggro. You only want to open with Avenger's Shield if it's like a single target enemy, like a single target boss, because if there's multiple bosses, then you will cleave the, you know, multiple bosses, like on Morose at Illidari Council or on High King Mulgar. Yeah, you probably do not want to do that. What Blood Elves can do is they can actually open with mana tap for a single target pull, which is really nice. Is why a lot of people do prefer still playing a Blood Elf, even when Blood Alliance Paladins are going to get Sealed Blood this time round, because, you know, they have just greater pulling potential when it comes to doing dungeons and everything like that. What Alliance Paladins can do is obviously use the Engineering Trinket or magic candles from mobs in the Elwyn Mines, and then basically follow up with a Judgment very quickly after that, because what the spell, basically it's like a 1.5 second cast fireball item. It will pull the mob, but it won't generate any aggro because it's going to miss, so you want to follow up with a Judgment very quickly to generate aggro. But I've used that item a number of times on High King Mulgar to make sure I only pull one boss. Then after you've done your Avenger's Shield, people like to quickly use a Judgment with Seal of Righteousness active to generate some early burst aggro. You can do that, or you can go straight into Seal of Vengeance. It's really up to you. And obviously if a target is undead or demon, you definitely want to prioritize Exorcism over Judgment because it's a very big aggro generating ability. Then apart from that, you're really just trying to keep down Consecration and maintain Holy Shield to obviously generate even more threat. You don't really want to be recasting Avenger's Shield, because when you cast an ability, you lose all of your avoidance, like all of it. So if you actually get melee by a boss while casting Avenger's Shield, you are bang in trouble if you cannot survive that hit. you only really want to be using it when the boss is not melee attacking you. For instance, when Nightbane is flying back down, you can fit in a cheeky little Avenger Shield if you want to. You can go even more ballsy, right, and use Avenger Shield between melee attacks. At the end of the day, Avenger Shield is a very fast cast. You can get it off between melee attacks, but you really need add-ons to track that very effectively. Otherwise, again, you are going to be banging trouble and take a full-on non-crushing immune hit. You can take the playstyle even further, actually, because you can do a little bit of cheeky seal twisting as a protection paladin. You can seal twist Seal of Vengeance and Seal of Righteousness. So what you try to do is you put Seal of Righteousness up to about 5 stacks, let it start ticking away, and the second it refreshes, you switch to Seal of Righteousness for about 3 melee hits. It really depends on your weapon speed. And then when Seal of Righteousness is about to fall off, and it's got about 5 seconds left, you switch back to Seal of Righteousness to refresh the dot. Because there is a small amount of time, basically of about 10 seconds, where you're kind of wasting damage because all of your melee hits on Seal of Vengeance when you've already got full stacks are not doing any extra damage. Okay, they're just refreshing the dot back up to 15 seconds, and you don't really actually need to do that, so you may as well weave in a few Seal of Righteousness hits. And you only want to be using Judgment when you have Seal of Vengeance active. So essentially you use Judgment when Seal of Vengeance is active and you switch back into Seal of Righteousness. If you want more detailed video on this, I do have a video on my channel that's basically called an AoE threat DPS guide. I did actually, when I started using this technique, increase my DPS by about 200 DPS, and obviously my threat was massively increased. I was even out DPSing some melee DPS on very melee unfriendly fights where they couldn't have 100% uptime on the boss. A lot of people took the mick out of me for making that video, thinking it was a total joke of a video, but I assure you it's absolutely not, and you will find it in the description of this video. It is basically a video on how to totally optimize your DPS and your threat as a protection paladin. There's also different builds that you can go for different roles, okay? For instance, you know, AoE farming, strat farm for money. You can take points out of protection and spec deeper into the righteous tree to pick up sanctuary or aura for more holy damage. Some paladins even like to mess about with this build in a raiding environment because obviously you are getting a lot more threat generation, AoE threat generation, so it's particularly useful on particular bosses and raids because sometimes you really do need a lot of AoE threat on adds, particularly Hyjal trash, for instance, because you obviously want to clear that as fast as humanly possible. I also think a lot of speedrunning guilds are going to adopt the, you know, better AoE damage protection paladin build for clearing trash packs faster in, you know, instances like Karazhan, and any instance really, where obviously the AoE damage is increased, which means the DPS can pump harder. Also, being an off-tank is kind of fun when you basically don't need to tank at all, because you can mess around with a two-handed weapon and, you know, try and do a little bit of damage in a mock retribution spec with a two-handed weapon, and then you can provide off heals for the main tank and also Blessing a Sacrifice for when he's about to take loads and loads of damage, and obviously switch weapon to a one-hander and shield when the, you know, tank is banging trouble or is used those cooldowns and you need that, you know, you're there as a backup tank. There's a few other cool tricks that you can do. It'd be difficult for me to mention them all in this video, but an example would be Blessing Protection Holy Wrath combo. Okay, so obviously Holy Wrath for some reason in TBC is a casted ability. It's very difficult to actually pull off because obviously when you're casting you're much more weakened by the fact you have 0 avoidance and, you know, more melee hits popping off at you the longer that cast becomes, so it's very awkward and irritating to use Holy Wrath in TBC. But luckily if you pre-pull with Blessing Protection, then run into a bunch of adds and then use Holy Wrath, you will have, you know, an easy time casting it, and then you can totally cancel Blessing Protection and, you know, continue as normal. So overall, I think the playstyle of a Protection Paladin is very extensive. There's a lot to learn. It's always been one of my favourite classes to play because I've always found the playstyle keeps me very, you know, engaged in the class, keeps me very busy and interested in actually playing the game. The skill healing is, you know, nice and high. There's always something you can be doing each week to improve yourself at playing the class and pushing yourself to be better and better for every raid night. But anyway guys, that's where I'm going to end the video there. If you want more detailed and informative Paladin information, then you can obviously go and check out Dr. Kael's channel called Get Carried. I'll also leave that in the description below. He's basically the oracle of the Protection Paladin, and if you follow his streams you can ask him as many questions as you want and probably learn quite a lot from him. But anyway, my name is MetaGoblin, and until my next video, ciao.